How are we doing, people? Phaze One here with the first episode of the Diary of an Up-and-Coming DJ podcast. A podcast that's going to be about drum and bass, rave culture and all the good stuff. We're going to talk about lots of subjects. There will be some guests in future episodes. But I thought for the first couple of episodes, because it is the Diary of an Up-and-Coming DJ, I would tell my story because, as I was told on multiple times, it's quite interesting. So here we go. I'm going to transport you back to 1992. I just finished junior school. My musical influences were Michael Jackson, a bit of commercial rap music, I suppose, but I'd never really been exposed to underground, rave, electronic music. I go to senior school and you're meeting loads of different other kids from other places, and I was exposed to the Prodigy, and I was literally blown away by them. I really brought into what they were doing.
Charlie says always tell your mummy before you go off somewhere.
We also had a bit of a youth club on a Friday night in Whittam, and a few of the older kids used to DJ and play, you know, they'd mix. You know, my idea of a DJ back in 1992, prior to seeing the older kids, was, you know, Disco Dave that does your weddings and stuff like that, playing Agadoo and Jive Bunny. But I went to the youth club and I watched older kids mix two tracks seamlessly together. You know, rave stuff, a lot of the early suburban bass stuff, Sons of Loop the Loop era, you know, Sesame Street Baby D, stuff like that. And I was just really blown away by it, and I was really into that sound. It was something that I really liked, and I'd started to sort of try and get my hands on a lot of the music in cassette form at the time. I wasn't really into buying records around that sort of time. I went to a party later that year, and I heard a track played by a very good friend of mine, Mr. Neil White, Donut, the Godfather, and it changed my perception of what I wanted to be, and my perception of music. It was the first sort of breakbeat bassline track that I'd heard that you'd call it jungle now, and it is classed as jungle, but it was What's My Code by Dub.
I tell the DJs what to play, you see? Play back that tape there for me, sir.
This is a track that stands the test of time, and if you follow me on the socials, you know I do a thing called the Reel of Nostalgia, where I talk about older tracks or newer tracks in the D&B scene, and we have a little deep dive into what they're about and stuff. And I've done this specific track, and I just had a great time doing it because it made me think of all the memories of how that track changed my perception of what I wanted to be. And that perception was, I looked at Donut, Neil White, mixing two records seamlessly, and I was like, I really want to do that. I really want to be the person that does that, you know. And I was watching him mix, select the tracks, also integrate the crowd, and have that crowd waiting for the next mix. And I was like, yeah, that's what I want to be. I also have a a good mate of mine, Benson, big up Benson. He was a little bit older than me, but he introduced me to audible tapes. Audible was an event that used to go on at the Paradise Club. Resident DJs were Randall, RIP, Dr. S. Gachet, Kenny Ken, Mickey Finn and Darren J and Resident MC GQ. And I heard a Randall and GQ tape in 1992. And again, I heard that and it never left my Walkman for like that whole year, because I was just listening to the way that Randall would mix those tunes, and the GQ would MC and hype up the crowd. He was a host MC, and it was just at the right time that he'd do his lyrics, and you could hear little snippets of the crowd in the background. So when there was a track that they were really into, you could get that vibe. And although I wasn't there, I thoroughly understood sort of what was going on in that event, and I was like, that's what I wanted to do. So for me, from that point on, late 1992, it was a case of doing my paper round, putting my paper round money away, and then going record shopping, which is something that I really want to talk about on this podcast, because I feel record shop culture is something that's gone, and I feel that if it was around now, perhaps there wouldn't be some of the issues we have with DJ culture, because record shop culture kept it all in line. I won't go too much into depth about it in this episode, because I'd like to do a separate episode and I'd like to speak to some of the people that were involved in the record shops around my way, and also that are still running a record shop. So I'll just broad brush it, but at the time there was a shop called Vinyl Rhythm that was in Chelmsford, and that was our local record shop. There was also a record shop in Whittam. Now, I don't know if you know where Whittam is, it's a very small place, but they had a record shop very briefly. This was prior to me being interested in buying records, so I used to go in there and pick up flyers of all the raves, and at my bedroom at home I'd have a wall with all the flyers up. My dad, bless him, put me up like a cork wall, so then I could put drawing pins in to keep the flyers up. So I didn't have blue tack on my walls, which a lot of kids I grew up with did, and then when they grew out of it all, they had these blue tack stains as red. I didn't, I just had this cork wall left. But yeah, I digress, and I say that my initial first delve into the record shop sort of thing was with Vinyl Rhythm. Now, I remember going up there about 14 years of age, getting a train up to Chelmsford, getting into the record shop, and straight away record shop culture was there, and it was like the most important people were the regular resident DJs that were playing at events around Chelmsford area and surrounding. They were at the front of the shop. Us spotty little oiks were firmly at the back. And the kind of thing was that the DJ that was working in there would pull down records, and he'd play the record, and you'd stick your hand up if you wanted it. Of course, being at the back, we could never get the records we wanted. So I remember the first time I went up there, I walked out of a record that I didn't want. But nevertheless, I experienced my first record purchase. So this kind of went on for a good couple of years, and it was about sort of 94 time. I built up a half decent collection, but I had no decks, I couldn't mix. But a friend of mine, he had a pair of belt drive turntables at his house, so we would bunk off school and go and play these records very badly around his house. And that was my first initial sort of go at trying to mix two records together. Now, anyone that's mixed on belt drive turntables before will know that it's an art form in itself, because they have a mind of their own. They go when they're not supposed to go, and yeah, if you know, you know. But I think it's the mark of a real DJ if you touch the belt drive turntable at one point in your life. And I did. That was my first interlude into it. Also had some other mates, Ricky and Cole Smith, big up Ricky and Cole Smith, who were the first guys they had a belt drive turntable and they had one Technic. Now the Technic was the go-to club standard and event standard turntable. Like whereas nowadays you'd have Pioneer in every club setup, back then before CDJs you would have Technics. So these things at the time cost a lot of money. You know, they were about £400 for a pair, which back in 93, 94 was a lot of money. So these guys were brothers, they chipped in together and they got one Technic. So we would go around there and we would have a bit more hands-on experience and we'd kind of work it out how to beat match. So I was getting somewhere with it. Then I at home had what would only be classed as a stereo stack system. Now, you probably don't know what a stereo stack system is, so ask your parents, but it was like a cassette player, a radio player, an amp that did absolutely nothing, and then a turntable on the top. My mum and dad had it, and it was always set in some sort of MDF, like to make it look like oak and stuff like that. But my mum and dad had one, and when they got a newer one, they gave me the old one. So I was chuffed to bits. It was upstairs, and it was the way for me to listen to the vinyl that I bought on the Saturday prior. But I also worked out that if I played a cassette tape from a rave, like an event, and then I brought the record that the DJ was playing in the cassette, I could then put the vinyl on, play the tape, and if I pressed both function buttons, both for the cassette and the vinyl, they'd both come out the speakers. So what I did was I'd do that, and then I'd learn to push round the vinyl, because it had no pitch control. Pitch control, if you don't know what that is, it speeds up, slows down the track, so you can mix it in seamlessly. But I'd push it around my finger until the beats matched up and I could hear it, and that's how I learned to beat match. And then when I'd go around Ricky or Cole's or my friend Luke's who had turntables, I would then just not use the pitch, but I'd push the vinyl round with my finger, and then I slowly learned to push it around my finger and then make the difference up with the pitch control. So there I sort of loosely taught myself how to beat mix in about 1995 or so, and I say loosely, I wasn't very good. So then we was with this dilemma. We had all this vinyl, like there was a few of us that were regularly going out and buying records each week for paper our money, and we wanted to DJ, we wanted to play these records out to people. The problem is there was a bit of a hierarchy, shall I say, in my town. There was DJs that were established, they were playing at Oscars, which was the local club down the road, the famous Oscars. And again, I'll go into an episode about clubs in Essex. I don't want to go into it too much on the first episode, but they were playing out there regularly, and they were doing a few of the parties in and around like where I grew up. So there was no chance we was ever going to get booked at any of these like that. So we decided to sort of throw in and do our own parties, and we did our leavers party in when we was leaving school. So that was my first booking, so to speak, the first time I play out in front of a crowd. It was actually on a pair of belt drive turntables, so I was happy because I'd used belt drives before, but I couldn't mix. There was a whole load of other factors that came into it that I hadn't anticipated that would happen, i.e. monitor speakers, the needles jumping, me absolutely scared to death and shaking like a dog, and not being able to put the needle on the vinyl. But it's all part of the learning curve. So anyway, that was kind of how it all began for me, from hearing Randall tapes to going into record shops, and then playing my first gig to a crowd of people. And there was a crowd, to be fair, so I put that tick in the box. but we still wanted more. We still wanted to try and build like a party brand. Back then we had all these ideas because we'd just been influenced by all these big raves and that we were still too young to go to. And at the time, you know, when I was 15, I looked about 13. I was very short. There was no way I was getting into anywhere with any fake ID or anything like that. So the plan for us was to try and run our own parties. Now, what we were doing by this point was going to London, because we'd worked out that to get the bookings, we had to have the best tunes. And the place where the best tunes were was London. Shops like Black Market, Unity Records, and Boogie Times, which is in Romford, which we started to go to. And again, it was learning that, you know, the hierarchy, the running order, the way things were, and it was very good for me at that age, going to London, going into a record shop, speaking to Nicky Black Market, speaking to Ray Keith, these heroes, these people that have been playing, you know, and all the tapes that I've got at home. And I'm in Black Market on a Saturday, or you know, or weekday, because we used to bunk off school and go up there when it was quiet, and we were able to talk to them, you know, and it was just like, wow, like we can talk to these guys that play at these raves, and they've got the tunes that they're playing up there, and we can buy them. So that's what we was doing, and we then started to put on our own little parties, just at like village halls and stuff like that. Between our little gang of like one of us had a technique, the other one had another technique. You know, we had a mixer, so we a few of us had speakers. So between us all, we could throw together a sound system, and we started to do these little parties, and we started to kind of make our own noise. And I think that's the ethos that I've always had, that if a door's shut and someone tells you no, go and create a door to walk through, go and do your own thing. And that's what we did. You know, the older generation kind of said, no, we're not going to book you, you can't play, you're too young. So we was like, okay, we're going to go and do our own thing here, we're going to go and put on our own events. So that's what we did, and it was a fantastic time, really. And it led me on to regularly record shopping. Also, I was lending my records to a lot of the guys that were playing at Oscars. I couldn't get in there again, but I was lending my records to them. So then my records were being played at an event. And then sort of as I got a little bit older, around 16, I could get into Oscars. Now Oscars at the time, as I said, I'll do an episode on clubs on Essex, but it used to be this thing that used to go on where it's infamous all-night parties. At the time when I started to get in, they didn't have their all-night licence, and it was kind of a bit on the downturn. It was coming towards the end. There was only a few more years left in it. But a guy called Jay Frenzik, big up Jay Frenzik, who ran Atmosphere magazine. Again, I'll do an episode on rave culture magazines and stuff like that, because I think that's important. But he had the residency at Oscars, and he was putting the likes of Andy C, Hype, Kenny Ken, and all the MCs in there each week at an event called Strictly Butter. And we used to go down there because, you know, we'd not seen these DJs up close and personal, and we could see them there. And this again really influenced me into wanting to put on my own events and wanting to get out there and do my own thing. Now, I'd been playing youth football, and I used to play in a little village called Hatfield Pembrell, and there's a pub called the Duke of Wellington. It's quite a prestigious pub, so bear with me. So it's got a huge car park, and back in the day, all the team coaches that were playing Ipswich used to stop in the car park there. So like all the Arsenal first team and all that used to drink in there on their way back from the game or on their way up there back in them days. And it had a function hall at the back. It's not there anymore, but rumour has it that the Prodigy played their first gig in there. So it is surrounded in sort of rave culture history. Now, that was one of the first pubs that, as little 16-year-olds, we could get in there and have a drink. And we got in there, the landlord at the time, Gene, big up Gene, he found out that I was a DJ, and he basically said to me, he said, right, here's what I'll do for you. You play on a Sunday night in the pub, house and garage and like nice stuff like that, and then every 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, I won't gonna pay you, but every 6 to 8 weeks, I'll let you have the function hall for nothing, so you can run your own parties there. So I was like, wow, this is cool, that sort of thing. So that's what we did. We started playing a residency in a pub. I had no clue how to play a residency. Now it's music that I didn't really know, but I sort of learned just to be able to get functional on a Saturday night every 6 weeks to be able to run my own party. So we used to run the parties at the Duke of Wellington, and it gave me the ability to be able to look far and wide for other DJs and MCs and get them involved that weren't necessarily from our area. So this was when I first met Jim Heist, big up Jim Heist. He was a fork truck driver at my mate Ricky's gaffer he worked, and Ricky come to me and he goes, look, I've got this geezer, he can mix like and he can scratch. Do you want him to come down? I was like, yeah, we'll get him down. So we had Jim, he was called James Muir, he was called Muir back then, and we had him at the event. Also, I met some guys from Chelmsford, Kev and Harley, and Harley was an MC, and they came down, and I was meant to get their details, phone numbers back then, and didn't. And then a couple of months later, I bumped into Harley. He was working at McDonald's. We was going through the drive-through. So we swapped numbers, and we created this friendship. And he come down and MC'd a couple of the events that I run at the Duke of Wellington. And then he goes to me, he goes, I've got this event at Oscars. Like, they're looking for up-and-coming DJs. Do you fancy it? And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, it's a DJ competition. And I've never been in a DJ competition before. I didn't have a clue what it was all about. And I remember going up to this DJ competition, and it was for this guy called Grant, and he ran an event called Epidemic. And that is where I'm going to leave this episode, because the Epidemic story is a whole other story, and the Grant story of our friendship and how it's helped me with my career deserves its own episode upright. So hopefully I haven't rabbited on too much, and hopefully you get the story. It's going to all be like this. I said I'm going to tell my story over the course of a couple of episodes, and then we're going to get into the bones of the drum and bass world, and we're going to talk about MC culture, record shop culture, the closure of venues, all of that sort of stuff. And as I said, we'll have some guests on in future episodes, but at the minute it's my story, the Phaze One story. So if you like what you have seen and heard, please hit the subscribe button. Also, this will be coming out audibly, so it will go out on Spotify, Apple Music, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcast from. But initially, there is the visual version where you can see me and hear me going out on the YouTube channel, my YouTube channel, which is Pure Drums. And I will catch you on the next episode.